Hello everyone, today we're bringing you the latest version of the CKS Question Bank, version 1.34. Please pay attention to this version number. There are some differences between the versions, specifically between CK and CKS. Previously, when we covered CK content, it was version 1.35. However, for CKS, the updates are a bit slower, especially since when it comes to security, updates tend to lag behind a little. So that's why it's version 1.34. For security-related exams, our version here is a bit lower than the one used for CKA. But overall, this doesn't have much of an impact. The commands themselves aren't significantly different. Alright, next, let's take a closer look at the security aspects of this. The content of the question bank. Next, the main thing we need to focus on is, as we've often discussed before, the issue with our exam environment. Each time, just make sure to fully restore the environment, and then you can start working from the beginning. There is no connection between us. The main issue is that for each question, everyone needs to remember to connect to the correct remote host. If you connect to the wrong one, you might spend a long time working only to realize something's not right. Some resources might be missing, for example. These are things you need to pay attention to. All right, I just wanted to briefly emphasize this again. We won't repeat it later on, right? So I won't keep repeating this point. Next, let's take a closer look. First of all, as for the exam content overall, there haven't been major changes, but some of the parameters in a few questions have changed to some extent. So here, we'll go over these details with everyone. First, let's look at the first question. The first question is about, because this question bank. What are the questions being tested? They're mainly about security issues, right? There are security-related problems. So first, the first question is about fixing the security vulnerabilities in our system and in etcd. Because actually, this question basically, in most cases, is fixed unless there's a variation in the question. Generally, the questions are fixed, so the security risks are usually the same as well, For example, take the first question. The first question asks us to fix the security issues in Kubernetes and etcd. However, it actually doesn't provide much information, right? It doesn't really give you much detail about this. When it comes to the details, right? There aren't many details provided. All it says is that when we run our CIS benchmark testing tool on a cluster created with kubeRDM, we found several issues that must be resolved. So what are the specific issues? We have to discover and fix them ourselves. In reality, actually, what do we need to pay attention to here? The main thing is that basically the changes to each question here aren't very significant. For example, the error message for the first question is actually fixed. The error is always the same. You just need to solve it according to the solution in the question bank. What we need to pay attention to here is that, in general, the things we need to modify include a total of... There are 2 points. The first is about Kubernetes, because here it says that both Kubernetes and etcd have issues. Both of them have problems. So the first thing is that we need to modify the authentication for Kubernetes, such as the anonymous users and our authentication mode. These are the 2 related aspects here. Then on the etcd side, there is a client cert auth configuration. So in total, there are 3 configurations that need to be addressed. And here, the difference between our simulated environment and the real environment is that in the real environment, there are actually a lot of topics. Each question really covers a different topic. But our simulated environment is just 3 virtual machines built with 3 VMs. So essentially, it's just one environment, and we work through these dozen or so topics within that single environment. However, what we need to pay attention to is, for the first question, since it's about fixing the environment, the initial state is actually broken. You can understand the issue as it's broken. Normally, when we check our environment, we usually start working when it's in a running state. But for the first question, it's broken from the start, and we have to fix it first so that we can continue with the following questions. So for the first question here, first of all, in this simulation session, there is a digitization or initialization script that you need to run yourself. But during the actual exam, it doesn't matter. You don't need to worry about this. In the exam, you just proceed as usual, right? In the exam, the environment will already be broken from the start. All right, that's our first question. Now let me demonstrate it for everyone. Okay, now we've switched to our simulation environment. As you can see, this effect is correct. One thing to note after entering is that for this question, since the security exam involves many issues that require administrator privileges, because for many configurations, you need administrator privileges to make changes. So compared to our usual practice, it's different from CKA. For CKA, all 16 questions can be completed as a regular user. However, for CKS, there are a few questions where we need to switch to the administrator user. You can simply use the sudo -i command to switch to the administrator user and execute the tasks. So for this question, we first need to remotely access the corresponding host, then use sudo -i to switch to the administrator. Next, we will use using our Ashes mean you go and execute our script. This script is for initialization, and after the initialization is complete, you just need to check with get hold. As long as you can't see it, that's correct. If you can see it, that's because our environment was normal at the beginning. At first, the environment is normal, but after we run this script, the environment becomes abnormal. Now the environment is abnormal. When the environment is abnormal, we start the repair process. First, our first step is to repair our part, the proplet part. Also, there was one thing I didn't mention earlier. For the Kubernetes part, there's actually another thing to note. It's best to use webhook-based authentication and authorization. This is also an important point. Actually, after adding the webhook, there are 3 places that need to be modified, and one of them is in the etc directory. Now let's first edit this part here. The configuration file. Let's edit our configuration file. On the VM, directly edit the Kubernetes file under the vrlab directory. After opening the config file in there, we can see its contents. First of all, the topic mentioned here is actually about authentication-related content. So where should you look for it? You must first find the section under authentication, specifically the content inside animals. Make sure you don't get the location wrong. It's under authentication, specifically under animals. Be very careful not to mix this up, don't get confused. Then, at this location for animals, we need to set it to false. And for the webhook setting, we need to set it to true. These two are exactly the opposite, so just remember that. Make a special note of it. Then below that, what do we look for? We look for this. At this location, we can see that there is also some information about our webhook, more information about the webhook. We need to change the mode from always allow because the question mentioned that we should try to correct it, so we should change it to use webhook authentication. That way there won't be any problems because for this question, actually there are 3 things to change in the Kubernetes section. After you're done, save it. Okay, that's the first file. For the second file, we need to modify the configuration file for our etcd. The path is a bit different, so please pay attention. On this EC side, the path is under the directory. The manifest in Kubernetes. The manifest file, the fast file. Then in this file, we need to edit it a bit. Which part? It's the client third OS mentioned in the program. It's right here. So let's look for it. You can just search for it directly. Client. It's right here. Just change false to true, and that's it. This question is actually just about just change that. Just change the number of times. That's all you need to do. Of course, you don't necessarily have to change it. Just keep in mind that during the exam, not everything will be wrong. So be careful. Don't just go in and blindly change true to false or false to true and think you're done. You need to remember what the final value should be. If, for example, out of 3 options, 2 are wrong, you need to pay attention to that. Or maybe 1 out of 3 is wrong. In this kind of situation, if you change all of them, it might not actually help and the results later on still won't improve. So everyone needs to pay attention here. Our goal is to improve the outcome, not just to change everything as if every single one is wrong, because that's not always the case. Please keep this in mind. Let's save it here. One is the Kubernetes configuration file, and the other is the ATC configuration file. After you finish modifying both configuration files, what do you do next? Next, we can reload our system environment. Then what do? Restart our services. Ultimately, the result we want is for all the codes to open successfully, because earlier, when we checked the posts, we couldn't see any of them, right? Not a single one worked. So here, what do we use to do this? As a result, we restart our crypt to make the 2 configurations we just changed take effect again. After they take effect, we use Kubernetes with getA to check the status. Here, just wait a little while, it won't take effect immediately. Usually waiting about 3 to 5 minutes should be enough. As you can see, there's still no response here. Nothing at all. It's still loading. Because there are quite a lot of pods. In our environment here, there are still quite a few pods. Because what we've actually done is stack all the environments for these screens together. So in this single environment, there are especially many pods. So here, just make sure that all the pods have finished starting up before proceeding. For the second question, not the third, just the latter part of the second, you can start after that. Alright, please pay attention to this. However, since our simulated environment will be needed for a few more questions later on, keep that in mind. There are places where configuration changes are needed, so there are 2 of them. There are 2 configuration holds, meaning there are 2 parts where the status is incorrect. For the rest, you can install yours, but since there are two, it's because we have ingress content later on, ingress content. As for the US content, what do we need? Its status is not running. There's also a status of container creating, which is fine as well. Just pay attention to this here. There are a total of 3 pods, right? You could say there are 3 pods in total, not including the ones being installed. As long as the other pods are running normally, you can continue to the next steps. All right, just a reminder for everyone. Let's wait a few minutes here. Once the environment is fully up, then for this question, we can wrap it up. Of course, during the exam, you don't need to wait. Once you finish this question and restart, you can just move on to the next one, right? After finishing the second question, you can come back and check the result of the first one. There's no need to force yourself to wait here. I have to wait because I'm simulating the environment, and for the simulation, we're using just one environment, but during the actual exam, the environments are separate. Just keep this in mind, everyone. Also, pay attention to this. After you're done, you need to exit twice. Whenever you switch to the administrator, you have to exit twice. First, to exit from the administrator back to the regular user, and second, from the regular user back to the original remote host. Just a reminder for everyone, whenever it involves administrator privileges, you need to exit twice. If you only exit once, you're actually still in the environment, still within the environment. Right now we have administrator privileges. At this point, let's take another look. It should be just about done. Let's check. Just like I mentioned earlier, there are 2 in the ingress that are in the completed state and 1 is in the creating state. That's fine. So these 3 are the ones we're talking about. These 3 are the ones. As long as these 3 and everything else is running, then there's no problem. And we can move on to the next question. To exit, you need to exit twice. Exit. Yes, you need to exit twice. Exit twice. Only then will you return to the original host. For the next question, just remotely connect to the next machine. All right, that's our first question. We'll continue to bring you explanations for other questions in the future. If you're interested, feel free to discuss in the comments below. If you need any resources, you can also message me directly. All right, that's it for today. Goodbye, everyone.